I'd like to welcome to you Micaela Cronin and the MacKillop Family Services, who will speak to us about the challenges and opportunities for organisations in supporting past residents. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to start by acknowledging that starting by pushing the off button on my iPad is not a good way to start. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we meet on Aboriginal land and pay my respects to elders past and present, and particularly acknowledge the importance of engaging with Aboriginal communities in this space, particularly around working to protect vulnerable children. So, it's a great pleasure to be here today, and particularly actually to speak after Peter. And I would like to just say that I commend and applaud what he has said and the forthrightness and honesty of the words he used. I spoke and I said that to him afterwards. And one of the things, and he said that he was a little worried, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, that he focused too much on the negative. And I said, I don't think so. I think that it was incredibly important for him to stand up and say exactly what he did say. And that, yes, there is a lot of good work that is being done, but none of that good work in any way erases one child being hurt or the overarching system issues that he spoke, I think, very, very eloquently about. So, I'm a leader of, as Claire said in the introduction, of one of the largest Catholic organisations in the country. And MacKillop Family Services' history in Victoria is, MacKillop itself was formed in 1997, but it was formed from 7 agencies who were the largest providers of institutional care to children, young people and mothers and babies in the state. So it is very important that we speak and are part of the discussion in this space, because our organisation has enormous responsibility and heritage in this space in terms of institutional care of children. So in terms of what I wanted to talk about today, I want to talk a little bit about our history as an organisation. I want to talk about what we have done as an organisation quite actively and thoughtfully to respond to that, what we've learnt as an organisation from those things that we've put in place, and what we think are the issues for us today. So, I've said a little bit about, and I do just want to reinforce some of what Peter said in terms of that there has been some absolutely appalling and unacceptable hurt and abuse done systemically to children while they were in institutional care by institutions whose primary purpose and existence is to protect and care for those children. And that is a fundamentally unacceptable thing that we need to face, and I really liked what Kevin said before about the response to fear being to absolutely face what's happened and to rise to the occasion around that. And I think that that's absolutely what we're called on to do now. And I think that, again, what Peter talked about in terms of this really being an incredible opportunity for us, and we are really called on to rise to the opportunity, while it is also incredibly distressing and challenging. I find it incredibly distressing reading the stories in the paper and hearing about what has happened, and being part of the Catholic Church as part of that, and being part of our organisation being part of that. But we need to learn from and face it. So I said MacKillop was formed in 1997. When we were formed, one of the things that I think the people who were a part of what was a reasonably long process in bringing those agencies together actually had quite a bit of foresight around was the need to actually really directly take on the issues around potential abuse of vulnerable children. And a couple of things were established on the basis of that. MacKillop has self-funded a Heritage and Information Centre, and some of you will know Jenny Blair, who has provided extraordinary leadership in that service since we were established. and that the purpose of that service has been and continues to be to respond to and meet with and share the records that we hold of people who grew up in institutions, the Catholic institutions in Victoria, that we were responsible for. Not all of them, but we were responsible for. That service, we have learnt a lot from that service, and we have the people who have been part of that, the individuals who have been part of that, have done some extraordinary work in terms of building relationships with and bearing witness, as Jenny said, to the stories of people who were who grew up in the institutions or spent time in the institutions that we were responsible for. I'll talk a bit more about the learnings of that, but in terms of what the organisation did, we established the Heritage Information Centre. We also, at the time, established, and it grew and changed over time, but what was called the Client Protection Panel, and which at its best, and it's not always been, it's not always perfect, but at its best, the concept was that there was an independent chair of a panel that would form when there was when a child or a young person, or when there was an allegation of abuse in care or quality of care issues raised. And some of the principles I think that were important in that were the independence of having someone external chair that committee and have some oversight of it, that it was an immediate response, and that the committee had oversight of an internal investigation. We no longer have that process because the Department of Human Services now has quality of care processes that all of us sign up to as part of funding and service agreements. But we didn't stop that process, and there was nothing, it didn't exist. Government didn't have a process like that when the organisation was formed. I think that there are still some issues around the way I think one of the things that I thought that really struck me about what Peter talked about this morning was the importance of acknowledging, recognising and putting in place systems that address where there are issues of conflict of interest. And he talked about that at a governance level, but I think at every level there are issues around conflicts of interest. If you were the person who recruited a foster carer and you worked really closely and supported them, you really probably shouldn't be the person who leads the investigation and is complaint against them. If you're a manager who is under pressure around performance targets and being managed around that, there needs to be checks and balances in place when there are investigations that might mean you lose targets. So there are operational issues where there are conflicts of interest that we need to be managing and monitoring and have things in place that will be checks and balances to that, as well as there are at the governance level in terms of what Peter talked about, in terms of reporting criminal activity or potential allegations around criminal activity directly to the police, and with no hesitation at all. So I think that's a really important issue that and I would imagine the Victorian Inquiry will be looking at that, and I would imagine the Royal Commission will be as well. Because it's not that those conflicts of interest for us, and how do we get some separations as an organisation. If you live in a small community and one of the staff, if you live in a rural community somewhere and the staff member who the allegation is against you play tennis with on the weekend, how do we as an organisation make sure that we're giving justice to and we are really listening to the most vulnerable people that we are responsible for? And I think that is one of the things that has been a real learning for us around the Heritage Information Service, has been the importance of as I said, bearing witness, but really being open to listen and hear both the good and the bad stories. That is our responsibility. We have to be prepared to hear those stories. And I think that sometimes that is difficult for individuals, and it is difficult for organisations to do that. So, in terms of what I wanted to say about what we've learned, I think one of the things that has been a real lesson for us is so we have a lot of former residents come and approach us generally looking for their records, and generally speaking, unfortunately, there's not much in the records. So it's a very important relationship that is built, and our staff have very much tried wherever possible to have face-to-face interactions so that they can really try and understand what is it that the person is looking for and what other ways can we help them to find that. If we can't find it, people often come thinking that there will be things in the records that just aren't there, that there will be information that will support or fill in bits of their memories, or gaps in the memories, that it will help. Often there are issues around identity, but all of us, those of us who are lucky have families who we can go and check in with and ask questions about. And are used to that's part of the conversations. You have conversations at Christmas or family gatherings about funny stories about things that you did when you were a kid. All of those things that build our identity, that people come looking for, photos of them, people that they spend a lot of time with in care, who they might have grown up with. Where are they now? They're often wanting to connect with the people who cared for them, the people who were often for us the brothers and sisters who they might have formed really good connections with. So there's a lot of things we can do if we really sit and listen and understand what it is they're looking for to help find those things in other ways. So the personal nature of that connection, the importance of bearing witness to their stories, and that our staff are trained to do that, as Jennifer talked about in terms of the need for people who will be part of this Royal Commission to be very well trained about how do you respond appropriately and deal with disclosures of sexual abuse. That's an important part of our staff's experiences. I think one of the other things I wanted to talk about in terms of I think we've been very lucky to have the Heritage Information Service, because I think that I've very much felt like it holds us to account. It's a service that, because these people now are adults, they're adults who grew up in institutional care, they come back and they bear witness to us about the impact of what happened to them when they were in our care. And for us to have that reminder and that regular reminder, and the Heritage Information Service is in our Cecil Street office, and people are there every day. There is usually someone walking through, and that's a good thing to be reminded about, because I think if you are just providing services and then you don't have any ongoing contact with, which is a terrible thing about the way our services are funded, there isn't that reminder about the impact of the care that the services that we are providing have on people into the future in their lives, at various stages in their lives. Our experience is that people come back to us looking for connection and contact when they have their own children. At important life stages, they want to make contact again. So we've been very lucky, I think, to have that service, and it does, I think, help us to hold on to the importance of being able to recognise the incredible good work of a lot of our staff and a lot of the importance of the work that we do, while at the same time recognising that bad things have been done, and bad things continue to be done, unfortunately, by the services that we are all responsible for. There are things, in terms of the way the residential care system, for example, is funded, that mean that children in our care are still sometimes suffering abuse. I need to start running out. One of the things I wanted to say about that in terms of learnings is that I think as an organisation it's really important to acknowledge that we need to live up to a higher standard in terms of the recruitment, and I noticed Peter had it up on his slide, but he didn't kind of dwell on it in terms of supervision of staff. So our recruitment of both staff and volunteer carers, and our supervision and our ongoing monitoring and oversight of those carers and staff. that we have to hold ourselves to an incredibly high account around that, because agencies like ours that work with vulnerable children are going to attract, at the worst, paedophiles. We're absolutely going to attract them. We are fabulous grounds for people who want to prey on vulnerable children and families, all the way through from the continuum of people who are paedophiles to people who really aren't, don't have the capabilities to manage themselves in a way that means that their behaviour is not abusing children. So that's something that I think, in terms of our learnings as an organisation, and something that we really need to be thinking about as well. I think that probably one of the key messages to finish with, though, is the issue around being prepared as an organisation to to develop the connections and dialogue that people who have been abused while they were in our services, if they wish to, if they come looking for that we are able to respond to that we are able to engage with them on a pastoral care level, that we are able to respond to their need for connection and to be heard, and that we can bear witness to the stories that they tell. Thank you.